During the McCarthy era, Peter Appleton, an American screenwriter, finds himself accused by the government of being affiliated with communists. He drinks heavily in a bar and then drives his car into the night during a violent rainstorm. His car crashes into the barrier of a bridge and plunges into the water, with Peter still inside. Peter's unconscious body eventually drifts to the shore near a small American town called Lotus. In the early morning, an elderly man discovers Peter Appleton lying by the water in a miserable condition. The old man takes him first to the town's diner and then to a doctor, who soon realizes that Peter has suffered from amnesia. Peter learns from his companion that this town lost many of its young men during the Second World War, which had ended only a few years earlier. The elderly man, Harry, one of those who lost their sons, insists that Peter is in fact his own son who never returned from the war he had left for 9 years earlier, claiming that Peter is actually his son, Luke Harry Trimble. Peter remembers nothing at all, and there indeed appears to be a striking resemblance between him and Luke, judging by the photographs and by the townspeople's readiness to believe that he is Luke Trimble, especially Luke's beloved, the doctor's daughter. Everyone tries to help Luke recover his past by reminding him of old incidents and shared memories, a method the doctor claims will restore his memory, yet all of it proves futile. Of course, we know what the townspeople do not. This man is Peter Appleton, the screenwriter whose accident brought him to this town, not Luke Trimble, who most likely died in the war. Peter gradually becomes fully immersed in his new life. He helps his supposed father restore and reopen his old movie theater, which had once been the town's only refuge where the people gathered to watch Hollywood films. After the cinema reopens, during one of the screening nights, Luke, or Peter, sits watching the film being shown. Suddenly, he finds himself finishing the dialogue lines before the actors even speak them. Peter is bewildered by this, for he has never seen the film before. He continues watching as images flash rapidly through his mind. He rushes toward the film's poster, reads the name of the writer, Peter Appleton, and only then does he remember who he truly is. At the same time, Harry Trimble, Luke's father, falls ill while changing the reels of that very film. Peter rushes to him as he lies dying in a deeply moving scene. Harry asks Peter, whom he believes to be his son Luke, to tell him the ending of the film. Peter replies that the hero triumphs and kills the villain. Harry dies shortly afterward, and Peter cannot bring himself to tell him that he is not truly his son. Meanwhile, the investigators discover Peter's car, trace him to the town, and arrest him, believing that he had fled and hidden there, an act they interpret as proof of his communist affiliation. The townspeople then look at Peter with profound contempt and bitterness, believing that he has deceived them as well. Peter is brought before a congressional investigation modeled on the McCarthy hearings, where artists and intellectuals were pressured to inform on their communist colleagues in exchange for their own safety. Peter's lawyer advises him to confess to the charge of communism and to accuse several colleagues, people Peter does not even know to be communists, telling him that this is the only way to avoid imprisonment. Influenced by Luke's beloved, Peter reads a copy of the United States Constitution and resolves within himself that he will never confess to such an accusation. He had indeed attended one communist meeting once, driven by a romantic attachment to a woman who belonged to that circle, yet he is neither a communist nor an informer. Peter stands in the chamber of Congress and speaks about the freedoms guaranteed by America and about the American Constitution, which forbids the government from adopting any single religion or ideology at the expense of all others. Peter declares that Lawson, the town that sent its sons to die for this country, deserves, along with the rest of America, a nation that respects its constitution, safeguards its liberties, and does not persecute the consciences of its citizens or wage war against their freedom of belief. Because of this speech, Peter escapes the fate of imprisonment and returns to Lawson, where the townspeople receive him with a triumphant welcome of a conquering hero. These were the events of the film The Majestic, starring the well-known American actor Jim Carrey. Amid the events of this film, which recounts a historical era that America today prefers to disavow, one particular element stands out sharply, almost like a discordant note within the narrative. The film that Peter was watching at the moment his memory returned is represented in our film by only a single scene. It depicts an Arab character named Khaled attempting to assault a Western woman until the Western hero appears and kills him with a sword. As Khaled receives the fatal blow, he cries out to his killer, "Damn you, infidel!" What exactly did the filmmakers intend to convey by selecting this particular scene to be the film playing in Harry Trimble's cinema that night? Clearly, any scene could have been placed on that screen for Peter Appleton to watch at the moment his memory returned. Almost any sequence could have served the narrative function. The plot hardly required that such a scene, constructed with this specific imagery and meaning, be the one he witnesses. Was the purpose merely to insert the familiar dose of Islamic terrorism that inexpensive Hollywood films so often force into the middle of their stories? In reality, no. This is not a casual insertion. The film was released in December 2001, only 3 months after the infamous September attacks. We therefore do not need speculation or conjecture. The film effectively introduces a powerful exception to the message it otherwise proclaims about protecting rights and freedoms and about the legitimacy of differences in opinion and belief. Those terrorists, portrayed as violators of women who hurl curses at the Western infidels, are clearly not included within the circle of freedoms the film claims to defend. And if McCarthyism were the means used to combat such terrorists, the film implicitly suggests that it would not necessarily object to it. In a scene lasting no more than 2 minutes, the image of Khaled, the Muslim, is condensed and stereotyped into that of a terrorist and a violator of women. At the same time, the image is symbolically encoded to imply that the paradise of American liberties must exclude such figures. Yet, is this the only implication of the scene? That interpretation seems somewhat strange, for the exclusion and punishment of a violent criminal appears self-evident and hardly requires special emphasis in such a context. In truth, another implicit message emerges when one considers the relationship between this scene and the broader narrative framework of the film. The deeper implication planted in the viewer's mind is that McCarthy-style suspicion is not entirely objectionable when it is directed toward Islamists as potential terrorists. McCarthyism, in essence, is a condition of pervasive suspicion. If we follow its logic here, it seems to say something quite simple. Yes, this well-dressed Muslim, who may not even have a beard, may not appear to be a terrorist. But that dear naive American is merely what you see. We know better. Leave such matters to us. Cinema, as a cultural phenomenon, plays a significant role in the construction of social meaning. Like many other cultural forms, it functions as a medium through which social and political messages are transmitted. It is not merely a vehicle of entertainment devoid of meaning, nor even a neutral platform that presents messages from an equal distance. In 1957, the French critic and filmmaker Laurent Barthes published a book entitled Mythologies. The book consists of a collection of short essays examining a wide range of phenomena, beginning with wrestling matches and ending with potato chips, while also discussing figures such as the actress Greta Garbo. The principal objective of these essays was to read social life in a way that reveals the underlying meanings embedded within such cultural phenomena. In the final essay, titled Myth Today, Barthes argues that the meanings transmitted through these phenomena are not natural cultural meanings produced in contrast to authentic meanings. Rather, they are mythical meanings. By mythical, Barthes refers to the way cultural phenomena are employed to convey social and political messages. Each of these messages implicitly contains a judgment that cancels or erases alternative or opposing messages. In this manner, myth presents itself as though it were an objective reality, rather than merely one message among many other possible meanings or interpretations. At the same time, the vast majority of dramatic works rely upon creating a strong sense of identification between the viewer's reality and the narrative presented to them, until the viewer gradually loses the boundary separating reality from fiction. For this reason, it is not uncommon to hear certain viewers speak about cinematic realism, as though what they had witnessed on the screen had truly occurred in the real world. Jean Baudrillard goes even further, suggesting that it is futile to ask whether we are observing reality itself or merely its simulation, because the two have collapsed into one another, leaving us with nothing but an image or scene. Thus, cinema and television possess the capacity to grant their audiences an intense sensation of realism, sometimes reaching the point of producing what Baudrillard describes as hyperreality. This fusion between realism and imagination constitutes one of the most powerful tools employed by modern media to manufacture consciousness, standardize images, and implant messages. The viewers resemble the prisoners in Plato's cave, who believed that the shadows projected upon the cave walls were unquestionable realities. Indeed, the level of identification produced by cinema may reach a point where viewers construct opinions, conclusions, and positions based upon the reality created for them by the cinematic image, without any genuine awareness of the fictional origin of the work, or even the awareness that the cinematic image itself is merely a condensed representation of a reality that may be far richer, more complex, and more layered. Cinema and dramatic works, through their immense capacity to construct reality, thus perform the function of myth as a carrier of ideology, becoming, in effect, a kind of sacred text for popular consciousness. As Schiller observes, myths are employed for a specific purpose, the control of the populace. When they are introduced imperceptibly into popular consciousness, something that indeed occurs through the apparatuses of culture and media, their power of influence multiplies, precisely because individuals remain unaware that they have been misled. Moreover, the process of control becomes even more effective through the particular form by which the myth is transmitted, since the technique of transmission itself can add a new dimension to the process of manipulation. A film, with its powerful sound effects and visual immersion, surpasses the traditional theater of illusion and leaves little room for imagination or reflective thought. The film assists the viewer, the victim, so to speak, in identifying directly with the constructed reality. In our present era, consumer culture no longer requires the imagination or spontaneity of its audience to activate psychological mechanisms. The products themselves, foremost among them the film, have already been structured in such a way that these mechanisms become paralyzed. Their organization is so meticulously designed that they demand a quick mind, sharp powers of observation, and the ability to follow their pace. Yet at the same time, they deprive the viewer of any genuine intellectual activity, since the viewer must concentrate continuously in order not to miss any event unfolding before their eyes. What is both striking and significant is that the ideological influence embedded within cinema often surpasses, in many cases, the impact of academic research and other forms of high intellectual culture. For this reason, Jack Shaheen once remarked, "Perhaps the influence of Mickey Mouse cartoons and Spielberg's films outweighs the impact of research studies produced at Harvard and Stanford." While many policymakers mistakenly deny the influence of Hollywood on public opinion and political decision-making, the actor Richard Dreyfuss does not share this view. He remarks, "There are filmmakers who have influenced me more profoundly than any assigned book, any civics teacher, or even much of what my parents taught me. Films endure indefinitely, much like books, yet their circulation is far wider and their impact far greater. For instance, approximately 6 months after a film's initial theatrical release in the United States, it is distributed across the world to nearly 150 countries. A few months later, both inside the United States and abroad, the same films become available for purchase or rental through online markets, video stores, and retail outlets such as Walmart. Subsequently, the films appear on cable television channels, followed by broadcasts on commercial television networks. After that, they are screened on airplane displays and shown in hospitals, schools, universities, prisons, and even dental clinics. Television systems, more than any other medium of communication, grant a kind of permanence to stereotypes. What must be acknowledged, whether or not we choose to describe cinema and television as instruments of soft power, is that this highly concentrated and complex system presented on the screen carries ideological content and implicit messages. Cinema, as a vehicle of ideology, constitutes an immensely powerful and far-reaching medium of dissemination. What must be added to this observation is the relationship between political and economic power and the ideology that cinema serves to convey. In 1924, shortly after the First World War, when cinema was still in its infancy, the Russian revolutionary leader Vladimir Lenin recognized the significance of film as a tool of propaganda. He famously declared, "Cinema must become, and will become, the foremost cultural weapon of the working class. For us, it is the most important of all the arts." At roughly the same time in the United States, Adolf Zucker, president of Paramount Pictures, echoed a remarkably similar conviction when he stated, "As a method of political propaganda, and as a channel for conveying ideas and opinions, nothing rivals the motion picture." The inherent capacity of films to carry and transmit ideological content, combined with the deliberate use of cinema by political authorities to advance their interests, together produced a vast body of cinematic work in which the stereotyping of Arabs, Muslims, and Islamists has occupied a prominent place. For more than a century, from 1896 until the present, Hollywood has frequently portrayed virtually everything associated with Arabs in a negative light. Long before the September 11th attacks, Islam was often depicted as a threat to the West. More than 1,000 films demonstrate conclusively that Arabs constitute one of the most misrepresented groups in the history of Hollywood cinema. Indeed, the stereotyping of Arabs represents one of the most persistent patterns in the history of film. Across the world, from Iceland to Isfahan, people of all generations, from children to great-grandparents, have at one time or another been exposed to the same damaging stereotype perpetuated by Hollywood, the portrayal of Arabs as bloodthirsty and barbaric. The stereotypical image of Arabs prior to September 11th closely resembles the caricatured image produced after that date. Consequently, the misleading portrayal of the villainous Arab has remained remarkably constant within cinematic representation. Hollywood has often depicted Arabs as subhuman beings, much in the way the Nazis once described the Roma and the Jews as subhumans. In this symbolic lineage, yesterday's Shylock has been replaced by today's hook-nosed sheik, a figure designed to evoke fear in the minds of others. The question therefore becomes, how can we read the messages carried by the screen and determine their nature, whether they represent genuine knowledge or ideological constructions based on distortion and reduction? And how can we identify the relationships that produce these messages and the forms they take? During the 1960s, the film theorist Christian Metz developed a series of studies on the semiology of cinema, the field concerned with interpreting the meanings embedded within the audiovisual structures presented on the cinematic screen. According to this approach, the meaning of any film can only be understood on two levels. The first level is the explicit, comprehensive level, understanding the story, its characters, conflicts, and events. This constitutes the film's apparent content, the level that most viewers reach regardless of their cultural, social, or educational background. The second level is the underlying, analytical level, where the director employs cinematic tools to communicate meanings that do not appear directly within the explicit narrative. This includes the use of specific shots, particular camera angles, distinctive camera movements, as well as the deliberate deployment of lighting and musical elements. Such meanings are not perceived equally by all viewers, because the language of cinema operates through multiple systems and intricate components. In reality, applying these analytical frameworks to the representation of Islamists in cinema and television drama reveals the depth and complexity of the distortive narrative constructed by these media forms. They produce a transcendent reality that surpasses the material world itself, a reality that often appears more convincing to captivated viewers than reality itself. In this sense, cinema becomes an exceptionally powerful instrument for transmitting ideological and propagandistic messages, particularly in shaping attitudes, constructing images, molding public consciousness, and ultimately manufacturing reality.